Welcome back to Wickedly Judged, the podcast where we uncover the dark truths of wrongful convictions and expose the flaws in the justice system that ruin lives. I'm Rebecca, and today we're diving right back into our conversation with Lisa Arrowood, who has been helping us peel back the layers of corruption in the case State of Florida versus Garrett Arrowood. In our last episode, Lisa gave us a disturbing look into the prosecutorial misconduct that plagued this case from the very beginning, how key evidence was buried, how the prosecutor twisted the facts to fit their narrative, and even went so far as to change the time of death to make their case stick. And if that wasn't enough, we learned about the shockingly small 6-person jury that decided Garrett's fate, raising serious concerns about fairness and justice. Today, we pick up where we left off, as Lisa explains exactly why Garrett was forced to stand trial with only 6 jurors. Was it a legal loophole, a strategic move by the prosecutor, or yet another example of how the system was stacked against him from the very beginning? Let's get into it. Okay, Lisa, last week we talked about why Garrett had a trial with only a 6-person jury, and you were getting ready to explain that to us. So please, if you would, continue. Going back to the jury selection. Why did he only have a 6-person jury?
So glad you asked that. And all the time that Baya Harrison kept telling us not to discuss the case, Baya says to me, because he and I were communicating quite a bit, he said, my parents and then my niece and my nephew were called into an interview with the prosecutors, and they wanted to know if they wanted the death penalty sought against my son. Well, of course, my parents said no. They didn't want the death penalty sought, but they did want to know the truth, because they felt exactly like I did. I mean, they loved Garrett, but if he did it, he needs to be put away for life, but they didn't want the death penalty. Well, my niece and nephew did. They wanted the death penalty. And so my parents, this is how I know this, because my parents told me that John Weed said, well, I just wanted to ask how you felt about it, because I wanted to let you know that we are not going to be seeking the death penalty. We just don't feel like we have enough evidence to support a death penalty case on this. That was how that was left. Court-appointed lawyer kept saying to me about that the death sentence could be on the table for Garrett. And so as soon as my parents told me about that meeting with John Weed, told him what I just told you, the whole thing, I said, they are not going to be seeking the death penalty. Well, the next thing I know, he went over with a piece of paper to have him sign, giving up his right to a 12-person jury in exchange for the 6-person jury so that the prosecutor would take the death penalty off the case. Now, I had already told Baya what they had told my family, that they were not seeking it because they didn't have the evidence. Because Garrett then calls us, and he just says, he's like, well, I signed that. And, we're not supposed to be talking about it. So I'm like, signed what? And he's like, the waiver. And I'm like, what are you talking about, Garrett? I did the waiver so that they wouldn't have the death penalty. Let me go. I call Baya. Oh, yes, Lisa, I have done a great thing. I have got the death penalty. You are not going to have to worry about that. I said, Baya Harrison, what are you doing? I already told you that they weren't seeking that. When you only have a 6-person jury, they take their job much more seriously. And I said, well, Baya, all I can tell you is that the state thinks that that is definitely to their advantage, or they wouldn't be offering that. So I don't see how that is good for us. You just have to trust me. It's good. Well, it was done. It was a done deal. He went over there and told Garrett that we supported that we told him that he should sign that piece of paper. Are you kidding me?
Let me throw this in for the people that are listening. When there is a death penalty case on the table, number one, you have more than one attorney. But if you are a public defender, you get to charge the state more money for being a death penalty case.
That is correct. And that is what my post-conviction attorney found out. And I can't spout the numbers off to you off the top of my head, but there was a lot of money that Baya Harrison made off of the case because it was a death penalty case.
whether it truly was or not.
That is correct.
He billed it as such.
That is correct. So it was all a money thing.
So now with this, I mean, there are some good public defenders out there. Don't get me wrong. There are. And there are some good attorneys out there. But anybody would be able to draw a conclusion that this public defender was not working for your son.
Correct.
He was working for the prosecution.
Oh, and it really took me a while to wrap my head around that, because I'm a very trusting person. I just think, I see and I think the good in people until I see different, So even like as all of this stuff is unfolding, I'm just sitting here going, no way. Like, I just can't believe. I'm still shocked that people, very educated people, knowingly, strategically do this. They're not seeking the truth. They're not trying to hold the real people accountable. It just doesn't even matter. And to know that an innocent person given a life sentence. My son is life with no parole. If they wanted to send him away for, drug use and whatnot, absolutely. You wouldn't hear a peep out of us. He's guilty of that, but he's not guilty of murder. They know he's not guilty of murder, yet they are clearly okay with pinning this on him and knowing that he's got a life. He has a death sentence, basically. It's, life with no parole in prison. And anybody that has a loved one in prison knows what that life is like. It's not like what everybody thinks. Oh, they get to lay around and watch TV and get 3 meals a day. My son is in North Florida. It is hot. 70 plus men packed into one concrete cell, in with people that's at the highest custody level, because he is the highest custody level. He is a convicted murderer, and no air conditioning. It's insane. People that don't know really don't know.
It is absolutely wild. And to know that your son did not do this, and this is the life that he is living right now, for what?
Exactly.
For why? Because somebody didn't want to admit that they made a mistake?
Yeah, I look back on that, and I think after they let Mandan walk out, that a very first day when they were all three detained, we'll say detained because they weren't all three arrested. I think that right then that started, that they were no way going to admit that they let the real person that murdered my sister walk away that day and stay out for 7 months.
Right. Living his life, doing what he wanted to do.
Yep.
Now, how is your post-conviction fight going?
Not good. We have presented excellent information. We had an evidentiary hearing a while back in something from the same judge, Judge Finna, who has recently retired, but he has denied every single motion that our post-conviction attorney has put in front of him. We have put forth even more evidence even than what I'm telling you. Like, it's just been crazy, the stuff that he has found of wrongdoing, and presented all this case law, and he just denies it. It gets sent up to the next level, it gets denied, and there'll be no explanation why. There's some legal term about that.
Well, that's because the upper court, which is usually the appellate court, after, because you have to, and most people, I don't know if y'all know this or not, but when you file a motion for post-conviction relief, you have to file it in the trial court.
Right.
9 times out of 10, they're going to deny it. So then it goes to the appellate court. Well, the judges that sit on the panel for the appellate court are previous judges and are friends with all the judges and the prosecutors in the lower court.
That is correct.
So they're not going to say, hey, our friend made a mistake, tea time at 9:00.
That's right.
That just doesn't happen. So then you have to have enough to take it to the state Supreme Court. And 9 times out of 10, it's going to get denied there as well.
That is correct. And that's what's happened to us. And a large part of that is good old Baya Harrison, the original court-appointed attorney, has flipped. You'd have to go through and read the transcript from the evidentiary hearing. It was unreal. I'll give you just kind of 2 examples. Oh, yes, I knew Garrett was in Jacksonville, and I was praying that they wouldn't bring that up. And, I did not ask for that GPS report because I was praying that they wouldn't bring that forward, because, oh my goodness, that would have shown flight. and that he was out in these pawn shops just doing everything he could do to make money to get his next fix. He comes right back to Perry on the exact same day. Like, what do you mean flight? He went to Jacksonville, Tallahassee, straight back to Perry, and hooks right back up with the Whiddens. Like, he has no concept that the Whiddens have just murdered his aunt. He goes right back with them and stays in the camper with them. There's no talk until Saturday. And even when Garrett got pulled over, Garrett had been kind of running over another run-in. His former guy that he was buying drugs from had put the word out that he was going to get Garrett because Garrett had quit buying drugs from him. He had made a police report saying that Garrett had stolen some stuff from him. Garrett said that's what he thought the whole thing was about. Wow. He thought he was getting arrested because they had found him because the dude had said that he stole the stuff from him.
So now where can you go from here? I mean, I know where you can go, but what's y'all's next step?
I'll tell you that By Harrison did. He even said at our evidentiary hearing, I'll paraphrase it, then Miss Arrowood sends me this picture after the trial showing Garrett over in Jacksonville. I don't know what she did to get the picture. You know, she would go to any length to do anything. She was going behind my back, doing all kinds of things, trying to help her son. He said that at the evidentiary hearing.
And yet the email chain shows that he sent it to you.
All the correspondence. Our lawyer gets up and goes, so wait a minute. So can you explain? Can you read that for me? You know, where does that email come from? Yes, by a Harrison, attorney at law. How was that? Did you send that? Well, I guess I must have sent that to Miss Arrowood. And the judge just takes it all in. He listens to everything. And because he was claiming, you know, all the different case law about not giving evidence.
Exculpatory evidence, which is if it's not presented during trial, it actually constitutes a Brady violation.
There we go, Brady. And there's another one. It's a female's name.
That one I'm not sure of. Giglio, maybe? I'm not sure about that one.
We did Giglio too, and he presented all different things that were just, right there in front of you. By Harrison, because he said that everything was strategic. That was the key that got everything off from him being held as ineffective.
It was all part of his strategy.
Right.
Yeah, strategy that didn't pan out.
Strategy.
Oh, I'm sure it was part of a strategy, the prosecution strategy.
And I can't tell you, 3 more cases since then that's been in our newspaper that by Harrison is representing the people. Same thing. They did a plea deal for a 6-person jury.
He's getting a cutback on that.
Oh, yeah, he is.
Yep, state kickbacks.
Yeah, and the judge, too, you're supposed to have an evidentiary hearing if there's, an exorbitant amount that they're requesting, you know? Because our attorney, like I told you, his son was the one that had represented Mandan, and he had asked for something, I don't know, money for something when he was representing Mandan, and the same judge, Judge Finna, made him go through all the steps. He had to have an evidentiary hearing to prove why he needed all of this money. Our attorney, the father attorney, went through all of Baya's. Never, not once did Judge Finna ask for an evidentiary hearing when Baya requested money. And it was a lot, $200,000 or $300,000 worth of stuff.
And the sad part about it is you can't even go to the Attorney General of the state of Florida to do an investigation on this because, his office was involved.
Yeah, before even all of that went down, our attorney did file a complaint with the DOJ on it. Basically just said they weren't interested in checking in on that because he he documented it very well. He just says not once. And there's evidently a law that if it's over, $10,000 or whatever, they are supposed to have an evidentiary hearing because this is taxpayer money, you know? So they're supposed to have an evidentiary hearing for them to prove why that money was needed. Never on bias. And then that state attorney that was the head state attorney, so I'm a business owner, so I'm thinking, things work in my business. If one of my employees is not doing as they should, people would typically come to me, file a complaint, let me know what's going on with my employee, and let me investigate it, check it out. out. So I'm still thinking, I'm not knowing. His name was Jeff Sigmeister. He is the head state attorney over this circuit. And so I write him a letter, and I put in quite a few pieces of evidence to show him wrongdoing on the part of John Weed, his assistant state attorney. And I send a letter with all of that information and request that we have a meeting to discuss it all. I don't ever hear anything from him. I'm up in the courthouse, and I'm going through the state attorney's office, and as I'm walking by, I know one of the ladies that works in there, and I see him. All these guys are sitting around. It's John Weed, James McCain, like assistant state attorneys. They're laughing and having a big time. And as I walk by, so I asked the lady in there, I said, "Is that Jeff Sigmeister?" And she said, "Yes, ma'am, it is." And I said, "You think you could ask him if he has a minute to speak to me when he gets done?" And she's like, "Sure." And so he gets through and he comes. I said, "Oh, hi." I said, "I'm Lisa Arrowood." And he said, "Yes, ma'am, I know who you are." And I said, "Oh, okay. Well, I was just wanting to see, did you receive my letter?" "Yes, I did." "Okay, well, I'd like to have a meeting with you, so we can maybe discuss." "Ma'am, I really have nothing to discuss with you. I can tell you right now, you are just wasting our time. Did you look at it? Did you not? You are okay with what you read? Did you not see the things that John Weed has done? Did you go look at, like, the interviews of what people had said versus what they turned and said at Garrett's trial, like how their stories were completely different? Somebody told them to say that." "Ma'am, I am telling you right now, you are just wasting our time." And I said, "We'll see about that." I said, "We're going to be filing to have a deposition." He says, "And I can tell you right now, I'll take it to the Supreme Court before any of my assistant state attorneys give you a deposition." I said, "Okay, I see where you stand, Mr. Sigmeister." That all happened very quick, and I went right then. I'm like, that man is not good. I didn't know to the full extent of how not good he was. I just knew, like, he was not interested at all in seeing the evidence that I, put forward. I had started doing a little checking on him, and I guess ruffled some feathers. I started emailing him directly, like asking questions, and he'd fire back at me, just be real nasty, When it got down to what we just talked about earlier about John Weed telling my family that they were not going to seek the death penalty, and yet by Harrison then offering the plea deal after he had already been told that. See, I knew the exact date that meeting happened, and so I started questioning him. I'm like, how do you explain that? Whenever he's already told him, and then the plea deal happens after the fact on such and such date, how do you explain that? How do you explain the amount of money that By Harrison received? Well, he would never answer me. So I finally got smart, and I got all of the media outlets' emails, addresses on there. It went something like this: "Mr. Sigmeister, this is the 8th time I have requested a response from you. I just need to know," and I went through all that again, and I had all of them copied on there. Well, then I immediately get a response. This is being looked into, and actually, just to clarify things, the death penalty was never officially off the table until the paper is signed. So even though he verbally told the family that they wouldn't be seeking the death penalty, until that paper is signed, that is not official. Then I start getting emails from some of them people, and one of the ladies, it was good. She was out of another county, and she's like, "Oh, you just don't know how crooked Jeff Sigmeister is. Let me just tell you, I know personally of a family that the guy that he golfs with and is his big drinking buddy had a DUI manslaughter. He killed somebody, and that conveniently got brought down to a misdemeanor charge. And I know another one where a child was murdered, and I don't remember the whole story. She laid it all out." Well, I'm like, okay. So I sent a letter to our governor, who had just been elected, DeSantis, and I said, "You need to know that you have a very corrupt state attorney, Jeff Sigmeister, in this 3rd Judicial Circuit in Florida." I blanked out her name, so I wasn't putting her on the spot because I didn't have her permission, but I told her story of what she said, and I told him what I just told you about my meeting with him, and about him having no interest at all in what his employees, the wrongdoing that they were doing. He sets the tone for the whole circuit here, and when you're getting things like like this, it just lets you know, like, something's not right here. That would have been in January. By November, all of a sudden, Jeff Sigmeister is abruptly resigning. He is resigning due to his wife and him were getting divorced, and he just needed some time off. Now, mind you, he was coming up for re-election, so he had just been all out campaigning for the thing that was coming up, but now all of a sudden, not only is he not running, but he's resigning early. So I'm like, okay, what's up? Well, come to find out, all kinds of craziness. Feds had came in and was investigating him for embezzling money, like he was taking money for bribes, like dropping charges for people or adding charges for people. When it came down to it, not only did the man, when it came time for he was fixing to go to trial for it, he ran. He assumed a false identity, got a camper trailer, hauled butt, left. Only reason he was ever even caught was he got in a car wreck out in Arizona, and the officer could tell that was a fake, phony ID, and off his fingerprints, they got him off his fingerprints that it was, this is Jeff Sigmeister, state attorney of Florida, that's wanted for, all these racketeering and all these different charges. So they extradited him back. He's all strung out on drugs, too, by the way, and extradited back to Florida to face his charges. And so I'm really, at that point, I'm thinking, yay, oh my goodness, God is exposing this, and this is wonderful, somebody cares. Somebody really does care in this system, He's supposed to be facing, over 100 years. He's supposed to get in prison. Well, he gets plea dealed down to 4 years. Right there, I'm kind of like, he served, I want to say 6 months.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, for unknown reasons, for reasons that are not disclosed, he has been released. I'm like, why did they even go after him? Like, somebody must have wanted him, but then they must not have had enough power to make it hold, because somebody came in and covered him, because he did not serve long at all. I don't know where he is or what he's doing now, but I will just tell you how involved that man was. He was so involved that whenever we were in front of Judge Fenna and we were exposing all this, that John Weed, he came down and personally represented the state at one of our hearings on behalf of the state. He personally represented for the state.
That's crazy.
It's like they were not backing down, and they were not going to let it be exposed what all they had done to have my son, falsely convicted of this.
Why were you never able to get a change of venue?
Because I kept asking that for Bobby. I'm like, I know everybody in this town. Like, everybody knows me. This is how crazy. One of the women that was on the jury, my husband was married previous to me. It was his ex-wife's sister was on the jury. Like, we know everybody. In all fairness, do I think that she was unbiased? I think that those 6 people, I would have done the same thing given the information that I was given. Can't fault the jury. I completely fault the prosecutor and our attorney for not having, not disclosing all the information.
Right.
And purposely presenting false information. I can't fault them, but that's just kind of how this town goes. Asked about that, and Baya, he just wasn't interested. He said he thought he could get a fair trial here, that it could be worse in another county. And a matter of fact, that's the reason we got Judge Fenna, because every judge in here, we had our 2 judges, they both recused themselves because they know me personally so well. That's how we ended up with Judge David Fenna out of Live Oak, which is where John Weed, his office is right down the hall from Judge David Fenna. Like, they're very close,
very good friends.
Yeah, exactly.
Would make very good co-defendants.
Yeah, they would. So what I started to say, you asked about kind of what's going on now. So we have 2 things. So the post-conviction motion that we had the evidentiary hearing on, all of that went to nothing. Then Mandan Whidden, story number 1385, reaches out to this lady. Her name is Kathy Gephardt. She used to live across the street from me, and she was our neighbor in our house where Garrett grew up. So Kathy keeps up with us, and she's like, there is no way Garrett could have killed Shelley. She's good friends of my sister too, so she's just kept in touch with us through all the years. So she has seen how everything was going, so she's been following, very appalled at Judge Fenna. Wrote him this nice letter after that evidentiary hearing, everything went down, and she just said, I am embarrassed as an American that our judicial system is handled like this. You have been presented so much evidence of wrongdoing, yet you continue to cover for these people. You should be ashamed of yourself. You were nothing but a buffoon. And I mean, she just puts it to him, writes this nice letter, sends it to Judge Fenna. Judge Fenna files it as part of the case. He has her served papers in North Carolina at her door, letting her know that this paperwork has been received and it is now part of this court case, and trying to intimidate her. She actually even called me and was like, oh my God, Lisa, I just got served papers and am I going to be in trouble for it? So I immediately call our lawyer, David Collins, and he's like, no, absolutely not. She is an American citizen. She has got freedom of speech. She can say anything she wants to Judge Fenna. That is, he is trying to intimidate her. You tell her not to worry one bit. She has not done anything wrong, and she is now part of our court case. Well, evidently Mandan gets this information with his court case. All I know is that he has it, and the reason that I know that he had it was because he wrote Kathy Gephardt a letter, and he mails it to her. And in it, he says, I read your letter, and you are so right. This whole thing has been such a fiasco. Garrett did not do this. Matter of fact, well, I don't know if that was the time he said Michael. His latest story is that Michael, my sister's son, did it. I'm not sure because he's told so many stories. So he writes her this long letter. She immediately sends it to me. I immediately send it to our attorney. Our attorney sends an investigator over to talk to Mandan. Mandan lays it out. He tells the investigator he was coerced to say all of this, that John Weed and his lawyer out of Jacksonville put together a script what he was to say, and that he tried to kill himself because he just couldn't take it anymore. He couldn't keep up with all the lies that they were making him say, and they were trying to make him lie on his daddy, and that none of them were involved. Not him, not his daddy, not Garrett. It was all Michael, and that Garrett needs to tell the truth and tell that they got them guns from his cousin Michael, that they exchanged Xanax pills for those guns that they went and hid on their property. Okay, so we file post-conviction motion on it. Now, with that said, there was several things. Okay, so the pill container comes up. In the meantime, Jeff Sigmeister, state attorney, is out. They get the new state attorney in. His name is John Garrett. We have a meeting with John Garrett. Lay out all of this stuff. John Weed still works for the state attorney's office. John Garrett gets moved to state attorney. Actually, don't get moved. He runs for election and gets elected state attorney. So we go to him, and our attorney is like, John, I know this is uncomfortable talking about John Weed. I too, you and I, we know each other. And the facts are, something ain't right. There is a lot of very unscrupulous things that have happened in this case. You're new here. I'm just asking you to take a look at it. I would like it relooked. Long story short, he's like, y'all keep going through your channels. He don't want to get involved. On the one hand, I understand where he's coming from. A piece of me as a business owner, like he's sitting here looking at this dude that has prosecuted tons of cases. If ours gets turned over because of the corruption that this man has done, what is that going to lead to? Who else is going to, what all the millions of other cases are going to come unraveled because of it?
Exactly. And that is exactly why they don't want to overturn it right there.
Yeah.
Because of all the other cases that will have to be reworked and the people that will be filing motions to get out on technicalities.
Yep. But on the other hand, where is your integrity?
Yep.
Right is right and wrong is wrong. And okay, it's going to cost a whole lot of hassle and a whole lot of trouble, but what about this boy that they know has been done wrong? And what am I going to do? You know, now I will say this, and our attorney says this. If John Garrett had been the state attorney, he don't think this would have ever went down like this, because he's like, really, genuinely inside, I think he's a good man. But with that said, I would have told you the same thing about John Weed until this case came up. And he said, you know, Lisa, I worked in Miami. Like, I have seen a lot of crap. And he said, I have never seen anything like this. He said, just in your face. And he said, I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed for our judicial system that y'all have been treated like this. And he has been a bulldog. Like, he has not minced words, and he has went to bat for us. But it has fell on deaf ears. Mm-hmm. Nobody has done anything. He has presented more than enough evidence to show what they have done, but nobody has done anything. You ask what's left. So we filed that motion. Of course, Judge Finna denied it. He just denied it. And so David has got an appeal into the next, the Court of Appeals on it, on the basis that he denied it without an evidentiary hearing. How can he deny it? He hasn't even looked at all the evidence.
Right.
Like, how can he not investigate these claims that this guy has made, And so we have that still pending over 2 years. And as well as I do, if David reaches out and asks, hey, why haven't I heard anything yet on this case? It's going to be an immediate denial. Like, you just don't do that.
Right.
You don't reach out to the appellate court asking them when they're going to rule on your case, or you're just basically asking for them to deny it. So we sit and we wait. Here goes the next little crazy twist. There was an inmate. I can just tell you his last name is Phillips. I don't really recall his first name, but he had sent years ago in prison. He is the bunkmate of Mandan Whidden. Mandan Whidden spills his guts to this guy. He's now claiming that he did it, and he claims that he used my father's 22. He claims, and my dad has a big farm, and he has what's called a mule, which is a side-by-side. It's a ATV, little vehicle that you ride in, like out across the fields, and he does farm work in it. And this mule, he tells this guy that he saw when he was over one time with Garrett, he looked in the glove box of that mule and he saw a 22, and he grabbed it and slipped it in his pants. And that he stole the 22 from my daddy. And that was the 22 that he shot my sister with. And that, so scared, he went back and put it back in the mule. Just put it back in there. Now, there's a whole craziness about Mandan was spotted at the end, like, not even kidding you, like 100 yards from my daddy's driveway. Women spotted Mandan down there all during this time when my sister was killed, looking hot and sweaty like he was running. That was their description of him. Asked him, was he okay? Yeah, I'm just waiting on a ride. Well, he did try to make up stories about what he was doing down at we call it the end of Osteen Road. While he was at the end of Osteen Road, and he was saying that his daddy and Garrett were back there cutting down scrap metal out of a pole barn, and the police all went out there, and there's no pole barn out there that nobody was cutting scrap metal out of. That's been his only story about what he was doing down there. So this guy sends John Weed this letter saying there are innocent people locked up. I, too, am innocent, so I have a heart for innocent people. I don't think it's right. And I'm writing this letter to tell you that Mandan Whidden, he blah, 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 all this. He told me this, and he told me that he was the one that did this, but he was not done right either because, y'all coerced him and told him to make up all these lies. Like, he tells him all that too. That John Weed was the one orchestrating it, telling him what to say. Nothing is done. Like, we don't hear about this forever, okay? Like, the guy writes the letter to John Weed, tells him that he needs to send an officer over because he has information that he needs, that there's innocent people in prison and he needs to come investigate it. Well, nothing happens. So everything, how they do in prison, you get transferred here, transferred there. Amanda gets transferred out. Garrett gets transferred to the same prison where this guy is, where this Phillips guy is. He comes in, he's in one area, he's in this bunk thing, or this one dorm. He switches dorms, and when he comes in, he says, this guy goes, what is your name? And he says, Arrowood. And the guy goes, is your name Garrett Arrowood? And he's like, do you know Mandan Whidden? Garrett's like, yeah. And he tells Garrett, he's like, this must be a sign from God. He said, I wrote this letter And he goes, he still has it. He printed it out and he shows Garrett, and Garrett's like, wow, you wrote this when? He says, ask me, Mom, have you heard? No, we ain't heard nothing about this. Guy takes it upon himself. He says, I'm supposed to follow up on this. So he takes and he writes another letter, and he tells them, he says, look, I have information concerning wrongful convictions and the murder of a woman in Taylor County, and I wrote the state attorney back in, and he gives the date that he wrote the letter, and I never heard anything back from him. He sends it to another state attorney, and from somebody that he knew from his case, from the county that he's from, and he's like, and nothing has been done, and I just feel the need to report this. And so he lays it all out. Well, all of a sudden now, John Weed has to, because the woman takes and sends it to John Weed and attaches John Garrett, his boss man, on it, and says, I've received this letter. I'm just letting you know what I received. This is from this inmate, and this is what it says. Well, of course, he has to now let our post-conviction attorney know about it. So he has to copy him in an email, and I'm like, oh my gosh, wow. And he claims, but he don't tell him in the letter all that he knows where the gun that Mandan used, which is what all I just told you, because they sent a law enforcement officer over there. He thought it was God telling him that he needed to do something about this when Garrett ended up being his bunkmate. And maybe God did. What are the chances of that?
That's wild.
That is wild. How? No way he could know without it coming out of Mandan's mouth. Now, the question is Mandan telling the truth this time? I mean, it's very odd to me that he knew my daddy had a 22 in the mule. And so they did, I do know that they did come and pick up the pistol from my dad just, week and a half ago maybe. Supposedly they are sending the bullets out to be checked against it. The law enforcement officer that has been assigned to this case, I have been talking with, and I have sat down and I have not told him in this much detail what I've shared with you, but he knows exactly where I stand on it. And I just said, please look into this. Please don't take what John Weed tells you, because John Weed will lie straight to your face. I have caught him multiple times. He will tell me something, I will fact check it, and it is a bald-faced lie. And then I confront him with it, and he just shrugs his shoulders at me. He has he does not even try to explain. You know why? Because he don't have to. Because he knows he's got a judge that's going to deny everything we put in front of him. So he doesn't care. He don't care that I catch him in a lie. Do not let him just tell you that the bullets can't be tested. Go look at them yourself. Get them and go test them. Let an expert test them. He promises me that he will, and that he is going to. So that's where we're standing right now. So right now, we're standing on a possible opening if this checks out. If this checks out to be the gun, but as sad as it is, I'm like, how do we know that the bullets that they have in the evidence locker are actually the bullets that killed my sister? You know what I mean?
Right. At this point, with all the things that were done corruptly, it's hard to even imagine.
So we just hope that they have super duper good pictures from autopsy of the bullets, and that they can compare them. Who can I trust that somebody's going to do that? And sadly, as crazy as it sounds, I do hope that's the gun. I mean, it's another kick in our teeth if it would be my daddy's gun that killed my sister, but the point being, my sister is dead, I don't think it can get any worse than that. So it can be no worse than what we're already dealing with.
Right.
So if it is, that at least lets us know that, Mandan was telling the truth there. So then that means the rest of his story if we can just get back in, all we want is another trial. Let us present all of the evidence to a jury and then let them decide what they think.
Yeah, there was enough in reading through your case records and everything that I saw that it should have at the very least raised reasonable doubt if it would have been presented.
Absolutely.
The pill container right there is enough to raise reasonable doubt. She had 2 undigested pills in her stomach, which would have been her morning pills. They were missing from the pill container in the picture that was sent the day of. So right there, that's enough to raise reasonable doubt.
Yep, the fact that she had a partially digested pear in her stomach. She was on a diet that the only time she could have one piece of fruit a day, and that was in the morning at breakfast. And there was a partially digested pear in her stomach. So, I mean, if they're saying they tried to back it up to wee hours of Monday night, she ate a pear that night and went to bed, and then very shortly after was killed.
Yeah.
But she got dressed because she's in a dress, had all her jewelry on in her car in the middle of the night. Does not make sense.
No, like that, just to a normal person on the street, if you told that story, it wouldn't make sense unless did a family member call and there was some kind of emergency or something. That would be the only way that could be rationalized.
Absolutely.
I am so sorry that you have had to deal with this.
Well, I appreciate that. I just hope that somebody hears this. It can help somebody, maybe even put ears back on our case, or even help somebody from falling into the same trap that we did, Get an attorney.
Yeah.
That's all I can say. Check everything out.
Don't speak to police.
Something's wrong. That's right. If your gut's telling you something's wrong, it is. Start looking.
Well, thank you very much for this interview today. I really appreciate it, and because you guys definitely need a fair shot at court.
I appreciate it so much.
And I will be back in touch with you here shortly.
Okay, that sounds wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. That's it for today's episode of Wickedly Judged. A huge thank you to Lisa Arrowood for joining us and sharing her son's story. We truly appreciate her time, strength, and willingness to shed light on his case. In our next episode, we'll be recapping her son's case, breaking down the key details, and discussing the unanswered questions that remain. You won't want to miss it. And remember, if you or someone you know has a case that needs reviewing, if you have evidence related to any of the cases that we've covered, or if you'd like to support the show through sponsorship or donations, reach out to us. Every piece of information, every bit of support brings us one step closer to uncovering the truth. You can contact us through social media or email wickedlyjudged@gmail.com, or you can even call us 513-393-7452. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with anyone who believes in justice. Your voice matters. Until next time, stay informed, stay persistent, and never stop seeking the truth.